well, let's get going. Oh, we do have somebody. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Hi there. So good to have you here. My name is Valerie Sloan. I work at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, which is also called NCAR. And in my past, I did research on glaciers and sea ice in the Arctic and other mountainous areas. And I've worked in the private sector, academia, and government. And now I work at a government-funded nonprofit called NCAR in workforce development. Today, my co-host is Ms. Rose Santana, who is a doctoral student at the University of Miami, and she is the senior social media specialist with the Society Black in Marine Sciences. So today, we're doing a career panel to help fertilize our imaginations about work options that you as science graduates have. In fact, I think professors could benefit from learning about these as well. It can be hard to learn about different career options when you're in university because we mainly see professors. So we are here today to assure you that there are loads of good jobs out there. I want to point out that by far, most science graduates go on to work in consulting firms, in industry and private sector, nonprofits, education, in the federal, state, or local government, or environmental law, social justice, and have very fulfilling and rewarding careers. I know I love my work. And so that's where most people go. They don't actually all go into grad school and then become professors, even though sometimes you get that impression at the universities. For those of you who are thinking about this, it can be helpful to have some graduate school, especially a master's degree, to land jobs that give a bit more autonomy. But having said that, many people grow and learn on the job, starting with a bachelor's degree. And
you got it. Give me some of it.
I think we need to mute. Oh. Okay, but you can still hear me, can you? Okay, thanks. Doing research though, in any sector of those sectors often requires having a PhD. However, in one large survey of employers by the Chronicle for Higher Education, most employers, maybe surprisingly, preferred to hire people with a master's degree over people with a PhD. Why do you think that could be? You can either unmute or you could put it in the chat. That they can pay people less? Is that what you're getting at? Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe overqualified. Yeah, their skills and knowledge is too specialized. Imagine if you're studying spots on frogs for 7 years doing your PhD, then you can sort of become too specialized in a way, right? Maybe younger, maybe the PhDs only know academia and they don't have other experiences, right? And I think the other things I've heard are that with a master's degree, employers like that people have project experience. And so it's good in your resumes and CVs to highlight project experience, even if it's from classwork. And at the same time, employers find that master's graduates tend to be a little bit more adaptable and flexible. Either way, the career path is usually winding. Next slide, please. Rose?
Yeah, so I actually put in that they can be molded to the company standards a little bit easier. So when we're thinking about a job, it's important that you want to recognize your qualities and, the sort of things that make you who you are and, what it is that you're looking for the future. Before looking at possible careers, it's important that you know who you are so that you can find the best career fit for yourself, right? A career that might work for me might not work for you or vice versa. There are 4 pieces to this puzzle, as shown in the Venn diagram on your screen right now. And each person has a unique combination of skills, interests, values, and personalities, right? So your career satisfaction will take into correction all 4 of those characteristics. So skills are essentially those aptitudes that either come naturally to you or those skills that you gain through experience. You know, you've got interests or things that you enjoy and tend to change over your lifetime. I don't know about you guys can let me know in the chat. My interests have certainly changed in the last 10 years or even in the last 5 years. I don't necessarily enjoy the same things that I used to enjoy before. You know, one way to really hone in on your interests or to think about things that you've enjoyed doing or are drawn to. Like, I know we had some artists here in our group, which is really cool. Values, and those are qualities or principles that influence your choices, and they provide guidance when you're evaluating your options. You know, while you may not find a career that matches 100% of your values, it is possible to find a career that matches your top values. So you can sort of pick and choose what's most important to you. And your personality, right? A personality is basically who you are. It's your unique characteristics that make you who you are. You can think about it in a career context. For example, do you like working in groups? Do you prefer working alone or both? Are you detail oriented or do you like being more creative? There are personality assessments that your career services center can give you to help you hone in on your specific traits. But at the end of the day, I think you probably know yourself best. And it's important to keep in mind, to keep these things in mind, because people are generally happier when their work aligns with their personality, their values, and their interests. We don't want to be those people that hate waking up in the morning and going to work, right, guys?
Yes, definitely. It helps. Okay, so actually before, maybe you could stop sharing just for a second, and we can sort of see everybody. I just wanted to introduce our panelists, and then we'll do a round robin with a couple of questions for them. And after that, we will move into a Q&A session. There are no breakout groups in this workshop. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Miss Carly Jackson. Wave hello, Carly, so you can see you. Who is a sea turtle research associate with NCF at Disney. How cool is that? And she is the co-founder of a group, a society called Minorities in Shark Sciences, or MISS. Next, I'd like to introduce Danae Carlos, who is a meteorologist. He's waving hello. And he is the deputy director of the Global Systems Laboratory at NOAA here in Boulder. Next, we have Christina Diaz-Clark. Wave hello, hi. And she is the assistant stranding coordinator at the Alabama Marine Mammal Stranding Network. And last, we have Rachel Medina. Wave hello. And she is a GIS consultant with a company called Bent Ear Solutions, LLC. And she is the mayor of Cortez, Colorado. So what I'd like to do, yes, it's a pretty great panel. I would like for each of you to tell us about what you do in your work and what you enjoy about your work and find challenging. Carly, do you want to go ahead? And Rose, can you share the slides again?
Yes. Awesome. Thank you for the introduction, Valerie. I forgot to let you know, I actually don't work at NCF anymore, New College of Florida. I'm only with MISS now, but we'll go over that in a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
But yeah, so my name is Carly Jackson. I am the Director of Communications for Minorities in Shark Sciences, which is an organization I co-founded with 3 other Black women shark scientists. So MISS, Minorities in Shark Sciences, the nickname is MISS. So MISS is an organization dedicated to increasing diversity within shark sciences among gender minorities of color. And we do that by promoting a lot of different programs. We create educational programs, workshop programs, and our main goal is to break the barriers that prevent a lot of minorities from entering the field of shark science. Shark science and marine science in general is a very big like pay to play field. So you have to pay to get experience. And then within that field, you kind of only get a monetized group of people that can afford to pay for those experiences. So basically with MISS, we provide like fellowship programs for MISS members who are gender minorities of color who are interested in shark sciences. And we provide all of these experiences for completely free, covering travel and stipends and things like that. So yeah, it's a passion project of mine and just something I love doing. My other roles at MISS, in addition to doing some of the education and program management, I mainly manage our social media. I facilitate a lot of donor and member communication. So we are a nonprofit, so we run off of philanthropy and in-kind donations, and you know, a lot of our programs are funded through crowdfunding and fundraising and things like that. So it's my job to make sure there's good communication between us and donors and our members. And yeah, I got my BS in biology from Florida Atlantic University and my master's in marine biology at Nova Southeastern University, where I did shark research. And we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so in addition to shark research, I do sea turtle science as well, mostly beach conservation and rehabilitation in sea turtle hospitals. So sea turtles was actually like my foot in the door to marine science. And, you know, it's not a bad thing to get your foot in the door with. You know, I get the best of both worlds, sea turtles and sharks. But yeah, sea turtles are cool. They nest here in Florida's beaches, and I've been working with them for about 5, 6 years now, helping mark nests on our beaches, helping in the sea turtle hospital in Boca Raton, where we get injured and like sick and injured sea turtles that we rehabilitate to get back out into the wild. And really the thing I enjoy most about all the work that I do is the field work aspect. I love being outside. I love getting dirty and like sweaty, like on boats or on the beach. And I also love educating. A big part of what I do is science communication and educating the public on sea turtles, on sharks, educating through different programs. But definitely the biggest challenge I'd say within this career is saying no to things and not filling up your plate, which I do a lot. You end up being like, wow, I have 1 hour to myself within this day and I still have 80,000 different things to do. So saying no is a good thing, and just balance. I think that also goes into saying no. So like work-life balance is kind of hard sometimes. But yeah, my advice for my just career advice is to focus on your own path and don't compare yourself to your peers, because I did this a lot. I still do it sometimes. I try not to, but you start comparing yourself to different people and you're just like, oh, I'm not doing what I thought I would do at this age, or they're doing that, and why am I not doing that? Like everyone's path is different, as long as you have the same, as long as you have like, you know, the goal that you want. How you get there varies, but just it's really important not to make yourself go crazy by comparing yourself to people around you. Can go to the last slide. Yeah, and these are just some pictures from throughout my career over the years. I did my master's research in Belize, where I looked at the effects of tourism on nurse sharks. That's where a lot of these, the nurse shark pictures of me in the water with the sharks, that was part of my project. And yeah, and I do a lot of shark tagging along like Broward and Miami counties in Florida, where we take data on different sharks and just assess the population, contributing to a lot of different research. And yeah, and these bottom pictures are the sea turtle pictures, because like I said, get the best of both worlds. Sharks are my first love, sea turtles are my second love, but they always they always tended to pay the bills. That's why I tell people sea turtles paid the bills. Sharks were like my passion.
Fun.
But not a bad thing to get the bills paid. But yeah, so I've done a lot in beach conservation. It's probably my favorite is beach conservation. But yeah, so that is
Thank you.
a little bit about me and my
That's
career.
so cool. Yeah, I can see why you get asked to do a lot of things and have trouble saying no, but what a cool lot of work, a cool bunch of work. Thank you, Carly.
Carly, what's your favorite shark?
My favorite
the
shark
people-
is the nurse shark. So the one that was in a part of my research, and they're the underrated sharks, I'd say. They're very underrated.
Cool. All right, thanks. Next slide, please. And now we have Danae Carlos. Take it away, Danae.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just really excited to be here, share a little bit about my story and what we do at the Global Systems Laboratory. As you can see in this particular picture, we are part of NOAA. So NOAA stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We have multiple line offices as part of NOAA. So we have the National Marine Fisheries Service, we have the National Weather Service, we have the research arm, which is where I work. We have the National Ocean Service. We also have something called OMAO, the Office of Marine Aviation Operations, and that's a uniform service within NOAA. And we have NESDIS, which is the National Environmental Information in Satellite something. I can't remember what all this stands for. Never worked there, but I wanted to just kind of share with you guys, you know, this is our facility. We're right up against the foothills here in Boulder. Working for NOAA, we have facilities all over the country, Miami, California, Seattle, and working for the government, you get to be in some of the best places in the United States and work in some of the greatest facilities in the United States, and in terms of where they're located, because you know the government's going to take the nicest properties out there. Working in a facility like this is one of the benefits and one of the reasons why I came to GSL, because I previously worked back in DC, Washington, DC. I'm a Howard University grad. Everyone knows Vice President Kamala Harris is a grad of Howard University as well. I have all of my degrees from Howard, so I'm a 3-time graduate of HU, which is a historically Black college and university in Washington, DC. So we can go on to the next slide. And so I am a meteorologist. It does say I'm the deputy director, but my training is in meteorology, atmospheric science. And so I like to kind of show this particular slide because what some people think I do is, you know, people say you stare out at the clouds. That's how you tell the weather, right? Some people, my friends, think I go out and I'm chasing storms all the time or chasing tornadoes. Which I've never done. I've never even seen a tornado. I grew up in Oklahoma and I've never seen a tornado, which is Tornado Alley. And so that's a little bit of an oxymoron. But what I think I do is I'm a pretty good mathematician, computer scientist, physicist, chemist, thermodynamic, physicist as well. So it's, meteorology is really a combination of all of those different types of things. And so knowing a little bit of that is really, really cool. And then, when I talk to some people, they actually think that I chase meteors. And then when other people ask me if I say I'm a meteorologist, they ask me what television station do I work for? Yeah, that's exactly right. They ask me, am I on TV? And I always tell a joke, which I'm not going to tell, but my wife, I tell her I'm too pretty to be on television. So that's the joke that I tell her. And then what I actually do is I sit at a computer running numerical models and codes and writing programs, all of those kind of things. So if you go to the next slide, that'll show you a little bit about what a research meteorologist actually does. And if you run that loop, that image there, if it can run. This is actually a numerical weather model. And you'll be able, if the loop runs, you'll be able to see some of the hurricanes forming in this particular loop. You'll also be able to see just the clouds. And this isn't a satellite image. This is actually just math. All it is math and science coming together to produce a visualization of different hurricanes and fronts and those kind of things where the cloud structures are moving. And so, you know, what I did mostly when I was a research meteorologist, you know, like I said, coding and scripting, did a lot of analysis of different forecasts. So statistics was really important. Verification of those statistics, very important. I wrote a lot in terms of writing papers and writing reports and those kind of things. I did a lot of presentations. So I've done hundreds of presentations all over the country. And also, you know, key skills are scientific collaboration, being able to collaborate with others, and being able to manage your time, you know, project management of resources, management of, you know, just your time and your ability to get a project done in time. And so you may get a project funded and maybe it's your project, and you know they're expecting you to get that job done, to get that project done within that time frame. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see here kind of what I feel are kind of my keys to success and my keys to career development and some of the jobs that I've held. I think all of you are REU students. I started my career as a REU student back in 1999. So I'm a little bit older than you all, but I was in the exact same REU program back in 99 at the City University of New York. That was my first internship that I actually did. Like I said, I was a research meteorologist, but then I transitioned into advising leadership on policy, on science policy, and specifically for NOAA. And I did that for a couple of years. And that took me to being an advisor for weather research. So I was no longer the one doing all of the coding. I was more so, you know, coordinating science and making recommendations and reviewing policy that may come from the Hill, or when I say the Hill, I mean Capitol Hill, Congress, those kind of things. And then I decided that I wanted to become a program manager and a project manager. So I went and got my PMP certification, which is a 4-hour test that I had to take to get the PMP certification. I did that maybe about 6 years ago. And then I was managing funds. And so I've managed funds up to around $15 million per year and giving out grants to scientists to do research, weather research, based on what my programmatic priorities were. And then that kind of led me to being a deputy director, where I haven't touched a computer code in a very, very long time. So I mainly go out and talk and represent the science that we do at GSL, and also make sure that we have the funding that we need to do the science that we do. And so, you know, those pictures, that one picture is with President Clinton that was on my wedding day. And so support really is one of the things that have really kind of helped me, because I'm a first generation college student. You know, back then I didn't know what I didn't know. I still kind of claim I don't know a lot, but I've been able to rise through the ranks because I'm a great listener. I take people's advice and I implement it into, you know, how I conduct business, right? And so opportunity is another thing. I've had so many different opportunities to come my way. You know, I lived in Hawaii once upon a time for 3 years and worked. That's how I joined NOAA, was they had a job for me in Hawaii, and they were like, I was living in DC, and they said, "What, do you want the job out there?" I was like, "Heck yeah, as long as my wife and my daughter are willing to move, we'll go out there and do it." But then, you know, inspiration I think is really key too. In this particular picture, you know, there's 3 presidents of the American Meteorological Society. One of them was the first African-American president of the society. And the guy on the left of me was the right of me, was the second African American to be the president. And then action, you know, be a person of your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And I've asked people like, what do you think, you know, probably one of my best assets are in terms of my career? What do you think that is? And most people say that I get things done. You know, I'm known for following up on the things that people need me to do, right? And so the career development skills, you know, you got to have really good people skills to be a really great scientist, because you need to communicate that science. You can't just keep it to yourself. You know, like I said, the listening skills, you got to be able to build trust with others. You know, there's going to be times when there's conflict. How do you resolve it and how do you manage it is another thing that you're going to have to deal with. And then, you know, early in your career, build on your technical expertise. You know, become that go-to person, whether it be sharks or meteorology or whatever. And then also at the same time, you know, help start to develop your leadership skills. You know, take some leadership training, those kind of things, so that you can be prepared to advance your career beyond just science. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Danae. Yeah, and I love your point about developing these other skills, and you know, you can do this through a lot of different ways, like organizing events or asking to be on a committee. A lot of different ways to make connections and develop these skills. Thank you for the thoughtful list of.
Do you ever miss the long hours of coding?
No, I don't. I did that for probably the first 9 years of my career. And that was kind of the point of developing my technical prowess. You know, I could still code if I really wanted to, but I've probably lost a little of my skill. I definitely can't code in Python like most of the young folks do today. But if I really needed to, I could pick it up.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure that you'll have questions a little bit later. Okay, next up is Christina Diaz-Clark. And so I'll just hand it over to you, Christina.
Awesome, thank you. Hi there. Just as a brief precursor, the room that I'm in has a timer on the lights. So if you see me jump up and go move over the lights, it's just because the lights are motion activated. So excuse me for that, just getting my steps in. But hello, my name is Christina Diaz-Clark, and I'm the Assistant Stranding Coordinator for the Alabama Marine Mammal Stranding Network, located on Dauphin Island, Alabama. And just a little bit of my background to begin. I got my Bachelor of Arts, actually, from the University of San Diego in 2017. I got my minor in theater arts. My Rose asked us what we would be doing, or Val asked us what we'd be doing if we weren't doing what we're doing now. And theater was my second love, and it comes in handy with outreach events such as this. Previously, right after I graduated college, I was applying for all the things that I could, trying to see what I could get out there. I knew that I wanted to be in marine mammalogy. I knew that was one of the biggest things that I was focused towards, working towards that. It's known to be a very small field. It's known to be a very competitive field. So I was applying for anything and everything I could figure out. So the first thing, one of the first positions I applied for was an internship at the Institute for Marine Mammalogy, for marine science over in Mississippi, and I was an animal care intern to begin with, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to work with live animals and like live animals that are under human care, or if I wanted to just do strictly research. I knew just based on what I was able to do in college that I really enjoyed field work, and that was something I really wanted to focus on as well. But I wasn't sure if the live animals, then the caring for animals was for me, so I started with that. I decided it was not for me, but I had a great time, and I had made some great connections, and I was hired as an animal caretaker just briefly while there was space opening up in the research department. So that actually worked out really well. So it always helps to be nice to everybody and make professional connections where you can. I was an animal caretaker for our parakeets for a very brief time, and then I was hired as a research assistant for a photo ID project with working with bottlenose dolphins. And then I, during a cross training kind of event where the photo ID people were asked to help out with a procedure over in the stranding department, I learned that stranding was kind of an interesting thing, and I'll go over kind of what that is for people who don't know. It's kind of a weird word. But basically, I went back to my boss and I said, I kind of like that. I kind of had fun. And I had a very great boss at that time, and she said, you know what? We have a position open in the training department. Do you want it? And that's how I moved to my next job, which is where I am now, the assistant training coordinator. So we are the permitted agency in Alabama. I went from Mississippi, now I'm in Alabama, to respond to sick, dead, and dying marine mammals. So it can be something that can be a little bit morbid at times, but we keep our own humor and like with what we need to deal with on a daily basis, and we figure out what we can do to help any animals that are still alive and in need of assistance, veterinary assistance. We have a vet on staff. But if it's an animal that's sick or already deceased, then we are the permitted agency that will go respond to these animals. And as we are able, we will bring them back to our lab and conduct what is called a necropsy, which is an animal autopsy, to figure out why the animal died. And from that, we can learn a lot about the ecosystem health that is here. We are right off of the southern end of Mobile Bay, Alabama, which is the 3rd or 4th largest freshwater discharge system in the United States. So we have a lot of interesting ecosystem pieces here, and dolphins are a sentinel species that are a little bit of what we'd like to call like the canaries in the coal mines kind of thing. So if something's wrong with the dolphins, we know something's wrong with the ecosystem. We use and have resources invested in the ecosystem, so it's important for us to know that as soon as we can. We can go on to the next slide. So a lot of the headlining things that I do that people always think about, kind of referencing a little bit of how Danae was talking about, like what my friends think I do, what my mom thinks I do. The first thing everyone always says is, you have a great job. You're out on the beach, you go play with the dolphins. And no, not really. We do have some live animals that do strand. And it's always a brand new adventure of whatever, it's always something unique that happens. But the grand majority of animals that we are responding to are already deceased. So we are out in the field on the boat, either doing searching for an animal, or again, on that top right, you can see us responding to an animal, recovering a carcass. We take a lot of photos. It's a little, getting my steps in, hold on. We're responding to animals, getting photos. Someone had mentioned forensic interest in like forensic science, and it's a little bit like dolphin CSI. So because dolphins are a protected species, dolphins and manatees, so we respond to manatees too. We have to take a lot of documentation for everything that we're doing, all the pieces or parts that we take for any kind of diagnostics. If we're trying to figure out, unfortunately, a lot of reasons that we see for why an animal has died is what we call HI, or human interaction. So we have training in how to identify rope or line or net marks on an animal carcass or animal, even a living body. And that unfortunately is a reason we do a lot of what we do, because our data then can inform either what we publish, because we are also connected to Dolphin Island Sea Lab, which is a consortium of all the universities in Alabama. So all the students can come here, but we've got faculty that can publish on the data that we are collecting. So if we're collecting on XYZ percentage amount of animals that we're getting have some kind of HI or net marking, we can look and say also to publish it, and also give it to people who make laws and say, maybe we can outlaw this certain kind of equipment because people are not being responsible with it and it's causing a lot of animals to die, for instance. So it can also affect management decisions in that way. So those are kind of a little bit of the headlining. We're going out and examining. In the top photo, you can see an example of an necropsy of a dolphin at the very beginning. But then the stuff that doesn't really get talked about so much is how much in the background that we're doing. So what I like to tell people is when we're out in the field or out on the boat, out doing things, collecting a carcass or collecting data, for every hour we're doing that, we have about the same, if not twice as much time that we spend on the computer, putting data in, cleaning our equipment. We have a lot of equipment that we use. We'd like to work smarter, not harder. So we're very fortunate to have a lot of heavy lifting equipment. But we also have to treat it really well and make sure it stays well maintained, to make sure that we can keep using that stuff. That's also just the base layer of also computer work, entering reports, reporting things to NOAA, different branch of NOAA. But then we've also got outreach. We have outreach events that we tell people about. People don't realize that we have manatees in Alabama and Mississippi waters. So telling people, hey, you have manatees in the area that you're boating in, maybe slow down. Because there's some, I'm sure maybe people don't know, but there's paperwork about how many scarring events that manatees will go through in their lifetime. It's very sad, just from they're big and they're slow, so people don't see them, or people are too fast, and they'll get hit and they'll get scarring along their back. But so reaching out, educating the public, talking to tour groups, talking to children. We have people who come through our lab and we're able to tell them a little about what we do. Personally, I didn't even know about stranding events or thought about like what even happens to a dead animal after it dies, like before I knew or was able to cross train in that department. But it's also a lot of mentoring. It's something I do think a lot about. I feel like I have a lot of responsibility of educating this like younger generation that will come after me, right? Like paving the way, being able to mentor interns and students that work with us to give them an opportunity. It's something that turns into a little bit of a challenge, but also is a good thing to always keep in mind of just, is what I'm doing going to be helpful and pave the way for better ease of access for people, either accessibility wise or based on race or based on like sexual preferences, like anything like that is always what I'm thinking about when I'm, we also have like our internship once a year. And it's a big thing that we always talk about, is being able to, is it what we're doing inclusive? It's a very, we are stationed in Southern Alabama. So that is always something that is at the forefront of our minds. Next slide, please. So yeah, moving into just the basic career advice. Something I am a strong proponent for is foot in the door is a foot in the door. So even if I didn't think that animal care was my cup of tea, try an internship. It's never going to hurt you to apply for something. You can always politely decline if you are fortunate to be accepted. But that's also what internships are for. I'm also hoping we are turning a little bit of a corner in not being as much paying or like being more towards paid internships. That is something that is still very common, is having unpaid internships, and it's not a feasible thing for a lot of people. But when and where you are, a foot in the door is a foot in the door. I didn't want to be a parakeet caretaker at all ever in my life, but it was what I was able to work towards to earn my spot when I had to wait for the spot in the research department that I was wanting to be a part of. Be open to new experiences. On that same note, just be open to it. Can't hurt to learn. You can meet new people, you can make connections. That's never a bad thing. Develop transferable skills. In my actual, in my university, in my marine science department, we didn't have any marine mammalogy professors. So I asked for the next best thing. I wanted to be in field work. I knew I wanted to be in field work. And I went to my advisor and I said, give me the roughest, toughest field work you've got, because I know that whatever it is I end up doing, if I end up being in marine mammalogy, I know it's going to be outside. So let me do the hardest, what no one wants to do, and be careful because they'll do it, and they did it. But here I am, and it was a good time. And always ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help for little things, for big things, for advice. I was part of the Career Development Center at the university, and that helped so much. There's in the workplace in general, overall, whether it's in science or anywhere else. there are so many weird hidden rules in applications, in like weird rules about making your CV or your cover letter. Cover letter is never optional, even if it says it is. But always ask for help for copy editing, anything. If you're just not sure, it never hurts to ask for help. So thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. That's super interesting. And thank you for that advice as well. It's good advice. Okay, so we'll have some questions in a minute. Okay, and now
Christina, before we move on, what's your favorite marine mammal?
That's such a tough one, and I always feel like it's a bit of an easy out to say dolphins, but I really like, it's called the Rizzo's dolphin, and they look so grumpy and cute. So Rizzo's dolphins, if you want to look them up, if you know what they look like, they're pretty adorable.
Cool, thanks. All right, next up, Rachel.
All right, hi, I'm Rachel Medina. I currently live in Cortez, Colorado, which is in the southwest corner. I'm near Durango and Mesa Verde National Park, if folks know where that is. I got a degree in geology at Fort Lewis in Durango, and then moved back to the Front Range to finish my GIS certificate. And then at that time, I'd really wanted to go to grad school. My teachers at Fort Lewis, that was the path they took. That was the path that they promoted to everyone. And so when I didn't have great grades, and so when I didn't get into grad school, I kind of admittedly felt like a failure. I was like, I didn't do this specific path that was kind of shown to me. I've learned a lot since then that there are so many different ways to kind of accomplish things and find your passion. It's about opportunities, it's about networking. So I ended up following the GIS path, and that was a lot easier to kind of get that experience and get jobs. And I'm really happy I did that. The geology really helped with my spatial thinking, which is a lot of what GIS is. And so I've really enjoyed that. I'm in a new job right now that's fully remote for a private company, but I've spent most of my GIS career working for the county here in Montezuma County. And being in a small community, you kind of get to do like all types of GIS, which has been really cool. And so I always recommend professional development. I think that's really important. So I joined GIS Colorado. It's a really active kind of GIS group in Colorado. I think it's a nonprofit with a board. So I got on the board, and then that was amazing. I got to meet GIS folks all across Colorado that are in the private industry, the public industry, or public and private sectors. And they have a listserv where if you're struggling with just trying to, answer a question or fix a problem, or just kind of any GIS question you have, you can shoot it to the group and you'll get a million answers on like, well, I've done it this way. And there's never a stupid question. And it's just a really supportive group. I also started doing consulting on the side to help nonprofits here and their GIS needs. And I think being a data person and also just loving volunteering and helping out, that kind of led me to also getting on city boards and kind of being involved in my community here. And being a data person has kind of driven how I approach city council. So I was elected in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. So everything was via Zoom. It was very interesting. But then I became the mayor this April. And so I'm all about like, well, what are the statistics? What's the data? How do we know, just like, how do you answer questions and make big decisions without that data? And so that's kind of the approach that I've taken. And so I've done a lot of also like leadership classes, and a lot of that I feel like is really emphasizing understanding who you are and how you approach things, and then being able to recognize that in other people so that you can work effectively together and understand each other. And really develop your communication. So I think understanding your values, it really helps you understand where you're coming from and what's important to you. And I think what we're also realizing is soft skills are so important. You know, the technical stuff is always going to be important, but you can learn that. But, you know, being a communicator, being reliable, all of those things, you know, building trust, those are really, really important, you know, because none of us work in silos. And then I've always learned too about being honest with my skills in job interviews. That way I'm not taking on a job that I'm not ready for, or I think just honesty is always a good approach. And then networking, you know, I'm a question asker, like always ask questions, you know, always get clarification. I think that really helps. I'm looking at the pictures. So the other thing I did too is I joined search and rescue, having that mapping background. You know, I was like, oh, I can bring this skill to them that, you know, others may not have. And I really enjoyed that, making maps for searches and kind of keeping track of the data for the search and rescue team. So if you go to the next slide, you know, so this is like, you know, hard analysis projects I've done where we're looking at, you know, all these different features for a watershed, and you're trying to take all this data, because how do you make a decision on where to do wildfire mitigation? You know, this is a big area and it takes a lot of funding. So how do you focus on key areas? You know, so I did like slope analysis and values, where are houses concentrated, where are utilities, to kind of help drive those decisions. And then the next slide. And then this is fun stuff. So then I've always done maps for like bike races that happen here. We have a 12-hour mountain bike race, you know, so you can see how many laps you do in 12 hours. This other one is, you know, depending on how long you want to ride, there's 4 different courses. So I've really enjoyed GIS and making maps, because I'm always a map person. But, you know, you just get to, there's anything that has a location, you know, you can make a map out of, and they're just so helpful in understanding the world and decision making. And then they're just fun to, you know, have while you're out hiking. So yeah, so sorry, I feel like I talked fast.
No, it's great. And very, very interesting. It seems like it's given you a lot of variety in what you do, like all these different people you work with and topics that you work on, which must be good.
And I feel like GIS is such a good skill for no matter what industry you're going into. Everyone kind of uses, you know, can utilize GIS and spatial data. So even if you're not going to be a GIS person, I highly recommend taking classes. It's really informative. Even if it's not something you use every day, you can at least understand where it's coming from. And
yeah, it's a good skill to have on your resume. And thank you for also sharing with us about the experience of, you know, not, I think you said not getting into grad schools and sort of feeling, you know, like a failure because that's what you were shown, and how, you know, you're such a great example of somebody who has made a career, you know, without grad school, and it looks very interesting and rewarding. But it does happen, and it's, you know, there's that pressure from academia to go to grad school, and not everybody can for a variety of reasons. So thanks for.
Yeah, and I think it's getting harder and harder to pay off loans if it's not covered. So it's like you want to be very intentional about, you know, the path you're taking, and if it makes sense for your future, which sometimes is hard to, you know, predict in general, but.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you, Rachel. Next slide, please. So just one last slide. And so just, you know, one of the things I feel like when I stopped teaching at universities, maybe 12 years ago or something, that I felt like, gosh, I really didn't know what is out there. And here I am trying to help students, you know, with finding careers. So here are a couple of ways, 3 ways that you can actually just explore what is out there. So one of the first one is the federal government is one of them. And so that includes agencies like NASA, Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Defense, USAID, Smithsonian Institution, Department of the Interior. You can see all of these, and there are almost certainly jobs that you could have and do well at any of those, and at branches of those organizations. All of the federal jobs are posted through a website called USA Jobs, every single one. And what you have to do is, you can look around there, and then they ask you to create a profile, which takes quite a bit of time. But you can get alerts on jobs, using keywords. You can get alerts about jobs that come up. But it can also explore what is out there. So make sure to consider that if you're looking around. And government jobs, they generally pay well. They have, I know retirement seems like forever away, but it's like healthcare, stuff like that. That's really nice to have those benefits. Okay, and the second one is Indeed and sites like that. So Indeed.com, you can put in, for example, meteorologist and the state where you would consider living, and jobs come up. And take a look at those jobs, what the descriptions are, see if it appeals to you. What are the qualifications and what are the duties? And with the qualifications, just, don't follow it to the letter. If they say they want 3 years of experience and you have 6 months, apply anyway, because people opt out, they sort of eliminate themselves before they should really do that. So, and if it's a short-term job, still consider it, because sometimes like we can't really hire people for long-term, but we have so much work and we have a fair bit of money. So it's pretty much likely going to go on beyond that. Then the third way is through, if you use in a search engine, the news tab. So for example, if you put in a couple of words in the search, but you click on the news tab, then stories come up, articles. And if you read those articles, you can see agencies, companies, and people and places, problems that are being dealt with. And you can look up those companies, like, would that be interesting to me to work at? Maybe there are quotes and interviews in the articles, and you can look up those people. And if it's really interesting to you, then you learn a little bit more about that topic and issue, and then cold email people and say, hey, I'm a student here and there, and I read about this issue in the paper, and I see that you're involved, and I had a question about how you are doing this project. And then later you can sort of say, I'm wondering about, internships or something. But it's great to do this even in advance of ever looking for jobs. So those are 3 ways of looking for jobs. So I think what we'll do now is, I think we can stop sharing, and we go into gallery view, and now let's open it up for questions for our panelists from people who are here. And just go ahead and unmic and speak, or you can put questions in the chat. So
I guess I have one question.
Okay.
So I guess this is for Danae mostly, because your career is kind of like, I guess, like my dream career. I thought it was like a really interesting and awesome career. But I guess like my university is mostly focused in geoscience with some atmospheric science, and I'm really interested in meteorology, and I've loved meteorology. So I guess what advice do you have for people who are interested in a field that their university doesn't really cover, but they really just want to get more experience in that?
Yeah, I've seen people, well, take me, for example. I was a chemistry major. And so what I did was I had never taken a meteorology atmospheric science class until I went for my master's degree. And so I think if you're if you're kind of geo science, geo kind of engineering type of major, then finish it up, get that bachelor's degree, and then look for universities that are, especially at the master's degree level, that are really aligned with what you really want to do. And the fun thing about doing that way too is, you know, if you get into a master's degree program and you start down, say, an atmospheric science, meteorology kind of track, like I said, there's so many directions you can go in there. So it really wasn't that hard for me to transition from chemistry to atmospheric chemistry. The hardest transition for me was, okay, when I decided to do a PhD in atmospheric science, meteorology, that was more so numerical weather prediction focused, because I barely knew how to program. And so I had to kind of teach myself and train myself. And there's so many things online that you can do to learn some of these skills that it's going to take for you to actually complete, say, a master's or PhD. You just gotta go out there and find the right advisor that's willing to work with you, that has some funding, because as scientists, we should not be paying for grad school, period. If you're paying for grad school, you're working for the wrong person. And so you need to find that person that got some money, that was willing to support you. And you go in there and do your research with that particular individual.
Thank you, Danae. So here's a question. Thank you for this presentation. If your home is in a city that has limited scientific industry companies, what are your tips on how one can jumpstart a new business like a biotech? What have you heard from people living in these kinds of scenarios? Does anybody want to take that on?
I would probably say, there is so much that can be done from home nowadays. I mean, like I hire people to do graphic design for my t-shirt company, using Fiverr. And so, there's so many, like with the internet, you can pretty much work from anywhere nowadays. And I feel like if you're willing to kind of put yourself out there, start small, and find folks to work with you on a particular activity or a particular project that you're kind of aligned to, then it's absolutely possible for sure. And the one thing I'll say is, depending on your career, sometimes you got to have mobility. And so why limit yourself to one particular location when, if you were to move, a couple hours away, you could have more opportunity. So I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And for me, I can't imagine living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, doing what I do now, because I've had to really kind of move around. I lived in DC, lived in Hawaii, lived in Colorado. But of course, this is the closest I've ever lived to home, being in Colorado. So, hopefully you're not limiting yourself just because of where you kind of grew up.
And sometimes people do, a job they don't love while they are developing their business. I think that Danae's advice to find people who are interested in similar things, regardless of where they're located now, and just being patient and persistent. That's what I've heard a few times from people who have started their own businesses. I see that, Sebastian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have kind of a general question about the comment on people are more likely to hire people with masters instead of PhDs because of like the specialization factor. Are there any ways that you can limit that, like whatever that is that off-puts people, like the specialization thing, while still getting a PhD?
I do not have a master's or a PhD, but I do work with faculty that have PhDs and masters. And they work on things that are projects that have a lot of, can be widely applicable. So that's one way. So being good also at certain things. So we have one faculty member in particular who is just the stats magician. And in that way, he is on almost every single one of the publications in our lab. So being good, find your niche, sorry, I'm in the dark now. But yeah, just finding a thing that you're good, either really, really good at and be invaluable in that as an asset in that way. Or being able to be some kind of asking the questions that can be applied to many different things. So you're not just asking one thing about one thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, even I was told by Val, if you're speaking, you're muted, but
Never mind. Yeah.
I was kind of told also something similar. It's try to find skills that are applicable to almost anything. Because even though you're specializing yourself in one tiny niche area and you're getting specialization in that one thing, the skills that you're using to specialize in that one thing are transferable to almost anything.
Thanks, Rose. So there's a question from Nicholas. Are master's programs in the atmospheric science typically funded or mainly only PhD programs? Danae, do you want to answer that?
Masters are, you can find funding for master's degrees in atmospheric science for sure.
Oh, good. Yes, because sometimes people, you know, they're pressure, they feel a lot of pressure to do the PhD, but you can also start the PhD and decide to finish with a master's. There's a comment for Carly. On your advice, sometimes you have to say no. How do you tell which opportunities to accept and which to say no to? Do you base it on your initial interest, potential for future opportunities, or something else?
That's a good question. I base it on like my availability and what I have going on like in life around that time. And also a big thing for me is, are you offering an honorarium and am I going to get paid for this opportunity? Because I gotta eat, gotta pay the bills, and that's what I'm gonna prioritize doing. But there are, you know, some opportunities where it depends on how big of a platform that they have. Like if they have a very massive like platform for certain opportunities where, you know, you can get your name out to a lot of different people, then I prioritize those opportunities as well. But for the most part, I would say as long as you're paying for the opportunity, and also in like research and more of like the research side of things, there's some projects that I've had to turn down, mostly because and saying no is an acquired skill. So you go through trial and error, but mostly because of like, you know, like life things, like you have a lot of things going on at a certain time. Like for me, I am getting married this summer and also going on a honeymoon and also just moved and doing a lot of things. So I had to say no to a lot of things.
But while Val's figuring that out,
Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, coding and scripting is really powerful. And I think a lot of people like to utilize those skills. I don't have them yet, but I am going to try and learn some because I think it'll help me perform my job better. And yeah, and I think there's kind of two approaches for GIS. One is like the mapping side, and then one is the background side, which is scripting. So it depends on what you like. I don't think every job requires it, but I think it's one of those skills that could be useful and is transferable. And then as far as GIS certificate, it's tough unless it's fully covered. I mean, I recommend learning as much as you can and doing the certificate on top of a degree, but if it's unaffordable, then that can limit people.
Thanks.
All right, we've got a question. If it would be helpful to get a master's degree for field related jobs. such as being an observer or a field technician. So
I can answer that. I would say that a bachelor's degree would suffice for technician related jobs. Usually you would need a master's degree if you're going more into the research side of things. So answering the question, creating the questions and answering the questions and analyzing those answers and things like that. But if you're more on the technician or observer side of things, you're mostly just collecting the data and collecting the data for those questions that researchers are answering. You can be a technician and do research, but for the most part, you would only need a bachelor's degree for technician and fieldwork things.
Thanks. There's a question about, unless it was talked about while I was off in La La Land. It's a question from Chris saying, how do you make time for your personal needs while working? The work-life balance question. So using the healthcare benefits of a federal job for my medical gender affirming. Surgeries, for example, will be difficult if I need to take time off and I can't afford to do that anyway. Or if I wanted to do something like go on a honeymoon. Danae, maybe since you're in the federal government, you could talk about that.
Yeah, I was trying to find the question, Val, but
it's at 2:09 p.m.
I think in terms of kind of work-life balance, it's being a researcher, you're gonna work some long hours for sure, depending on which projects that you are kind of working on, because you'll have to probably juggle multiple projects as well. But it to me, that is kind of a personal decision, right? And what do you really need in terms of a work-life balance? Are you comfortable working, 9 to 7 and then, being off for 3 years? Or are you one of those people that, you need to stick to that 9 to 5 because you got to go take the kids somewhere, or you got your wife or your significant other, or whatever. Those are things that you're going to have to just try to balance kind of on your own and really get a sense of what that looks like for you, because I think it looks differently for each one of us. I think kind of early on in your career, you probably will work some longer hours than most. But as you start to kind of gain stature within your organization and within your field, maybe that'll kind of balance out a little bit more. And so I think I worked really hard, master's, PhD, probably 60 plus hours. But then as I kind of got into my career, I was able to kind of decrease that and be a little bit more balanced. And so,
and Chris says they're aiming to work at the National Weather Service, so it will be shift work.
Yeah.
For them if they can make it.
And so, like for me, I made the decision that I didn't want to be a shift worker. So I wanted to work in a laboratory where I could be more of a 9 to 5. That 40 hours a week, every Monday through Friday.
Thank you. We have a question on what are some of the best ways to actually find master's or even PhD programs. And I was going to see if Carly and Rose wanted to answer that.
I think, Rose, you had said that in the chat, focus on finding a good advisor that aligns well with you and what you want to do rather than focusing on a program, because I definitely made that mistake in grad school, was focusing more on the program and not finding the advisor first. It still worked out, but it definitely would have been easier if in a smoother path if I had looked more for an advisor to work with. Because I think having a good advisor is like one of the most important things to have in grad school. But in terms of how to find these advisors is really just looking at different schools that you might be interested in and looking at their faculty lists. And usually their faculty will have websites to their lab, and you'll be able to see the different projects the people within their lab are doing, and also just like talking to people within their lab, like if there are email addresses, just reaching out to people in their lab or people who have been in their lab, just to, you know, see how the lab dynamic and the advisor is. But yeah, that is definitely look for the advisor.
Yeah, I mean, advisors are key. I've dealt with terrible advisors. I'm now dealing with, you know, an advisor that seems really great. And, you know, I feel like an advisor can make or break your graduate school experience. You know, if you end up with a really crappy advisor, it's just a mess and a half. One thing that I do is I look at papers. So I look up scientific papers that I really like, and I sort of backtrack it from there and find out who worked on that project. And then I sort of try to see where they are, you know, like demographically where they are, what universities they're at, and reach out to them that way. One thing that's become more and more prevalent, which is really cool, is Twitter. You can follow certain hashtags, and academic Twitter is wild, you guys, you know, so people are constantly posting, you know, opportunities there as well, especially if you follow like certain hashtags or like certain niches, and they'll post a lot of stuff there. And it's just a great way to even just interact with people beforehand. You know, I know a lot of people who, you know, we've tweeted back and forth at each other, and now it's just like, well, we work together. So yeah. And don't be, I always say, don't be like a jackass, I feel like is a good way to put it, because you never know who you're going to end up working with again in the future. The fun fact, apparently I met Val like 2 years ago and we didn't even realize it, and now I'm working with her. So, you know, try not to be a jackass to people if you don't think you need them right then and there, because you might down the road.
And we also met through Twitter because of problems that Rose was having with somebody else.
With
an advisor, expecting her to work 60 hours a week, telling racist jokes and worse. Yeah. What do employment opportunities in the U.S. national labs look like? How does research at those institutions differ from research at universities? Primarily, the teaching is the biggest difference. That at research labs, people are not teaching, although they do take on graduate students and postdocs. Danae, maybe you can comment on the employment opportunities and also the research.
Yeah, and I will say also that many of the research positions are cooperative institute, which means they're academic positions. So especially for NOAA, we have most of our researchers come from the cooperative institute. So they work for CU Boulder or Colorado State University, but they sit in our laboratory. And you can't tell the difference between a federal employee or a cooperative institute employee. And then there's also a lot of contract positions that NOAA hires for. NASA definitely has a huge contractor workforce as well. And they hire master's, PhDs, graduates to conduct research for them as well. The one thing about the federal government is that they don't want the government to get bigger. So there's not going to be a bunch of federal positions always open, especially for research. And so the best track for you to potentially get a federal position is to go through, say, an academic institution or a federal contractor, which is a private sector company, say like a Raytheon or somebody like that.
Right. Yeah. And if you enjoy doing something like organizing people, you know, maybe it's a manager at a restaurant or managing TAs or something like that, you can find companies like Raytheon that do big contracts in places like Greenland and Antarctica, and they hire people a lot. So to get some experience in scientific illustration related opportunities, what places outside of academia would be a good place to start? I want to do scientific illustration from observation, fine art related to nature and people, and educational illustrations.
I can take a stab at this one. I think a really good way to get opportunities like that is reaching out to different organizations to see if they need anyone to do scientific illustrations. For Miss, we actually did have someone who reached out saying like, hey, like I do scientific illustrations and I'm just, I'm here if you guys need anything. So we ended up using them to create little guidebooks, shark identification guidebooks. And, it was just a good experience for that person in scientific illustration, getting everything anatomically correct and everything. So it's just going out to those or reaching out to organizations like nonprofits for sure, just, volunteering to do scientific illustrations. And that's how you kind of build your own portfolio as well.
Thank you. All right. Oh, yes. So here's a suggestion from Kyle. Reaching out to nonprofits is always a good idea. I found that they often need graphic design to get their messages across. And I put in the chat to find societies that will support you, where you can, you have people, peers and mentors who will support you. For example, the American Meteorological Society has local chapters at different universities. AGU has a diversity committee. Oh, that's called BRAID, that you're welcome to join. National Association of Black Geoscientists, SACNAS, SOLAS. And, it can really help. I think I know people who have definitely found support, especially, when they really needed it. Did we miss any questions?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're caught up. I mean, one thing is don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, I do science communication work and I do a lot of social media stuff for Black and Marine Science. That was kind of me just messing about, and I was like, hey, can I help out with this? And now it's a paid, like I get paid for my work. So, I reached out to them. I was like, hey, can I help with your science communication and your social media stuff? And, it sort of turned into a paid job afterwards. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there, take a risk. The worst that can happen is someone says no. The best that can happen is you get a job.
And then in Rose's case, through that connection, she ended up having a summer job with us at NCAR. So you just, the opportunities just kind of grow. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm sure you do, but it's feel free to ask them.
Well, I'm going to go with a patented, very general. If you guys could give yourself, like your younger self, a piece of advice, or you knew now, like then what you know now, what would you have done differently?
Is that for the panelists?
Yes.
Rachel?
I'd say be open to learning more different skills, and not underestimating how they'll play in later. And then not being so hard on myself. And then realizing that the community is extremely supportive, and don't be afraid to ask questions and kind of look for a mentor, and just be open to that support, because in general, people, are just excited that you're learning, and kind of want to help you through your path.
Thank you. I love also, as you say, not being so hard on yourself, giving yourself grace and kindness. It's important, and there should be no shame, just everybody's doing their best. Carly, how about you?
Yeah, I think that I wish that I knew that or I needed this constant reminder coming up in my career, is that every opportunity or every experience is a learning opportunity, whether that be good or bad, and it shapes you into, the person that you're going to be when you reach your end career goal. And also, I think it's always good to remember that it's okay if you don't like something. I kind of had I don't know. I just feel like I liked so many of my jobs, and then I had one job that I absolutely didn't like, and I was like, this is it. Like, I have just completely ruined my career. Like, I hate this. The world is ending. But it's just a good reminder just to remember that it's okay to not like something, because not liking something is you also learning that you didn't like it. So in the future you knows. But yeah, and not everything's going to be perfect. I think that's a good reminder.
Mhm. Thanks. Christina.
See, I think a couple of things. Trust yourself, trust your gut. Be kind to yourself. Don't let the imposter syndrome get you down. You know more than you think you do, and if you're put on the spot in a situation, trust yourself to get through it. Similar to kind of what Carly was saying, sometimes, or even grows with the advisors, whether it's advisors or managers or supervisors or bosses, whatever it is, or even just your coworkers. If people aren't treating you well and you can't leave like a toxic work environment immediately, take note of what it is that you would do differently in that situation as a coworker or as an advisor, and how you would treat someone differently to be able to be a positive role model and positive leader moving forward out of that situation.
Mhm. Right, and sort of, reaching down, pulling up, giving back, and those experiences not only are rewarding, but people appreciate, and they see that. Danae.
Yeah, I guess mine would be the quote that fear is a liar. And, I was really fearful, coming up, being first gen, professional, working as a meteorologist. But understanding that my voice has value and your voice has value, no matter what age you are, I think is really important. And don't be fearful of the moment. Accept the opportunities that kind of come your way, create opportunities for yourself, be willing to live in your truth as well, and know that your voice matters. That's what I would have told.
And I would say, to myself, don't try to fit in so much. So for me, it was, I was in very much male dominated field, science, only woman in the field year after year after year. And I was always trying to adapt and, be more like them. And in the end, it didn't help, I don't think. Plus, in the end, it sort of robs you of your own qualities. And I've heard various people of color say the same, and people from the LGBTQ say the same as well, that assimilation isn't necessarily the route to go, but sometimes, to some extent you have to, in order to be able to function in whatever culture you're in. Well, thanks so much, everyone. We're right on time. So if all the panelists, if you could put your emails in the chat, that would be terrific, because then people can contact us. Feel free to contact me. And oh, thank you, OSU Hatfield. So glad that you came, everyone, and we can share the recording and the slides with you. Takes a little while to get the recording up, but so glad you came and asked questions. And a big thank you to the panel. So you want to unmic and clap, or do a little clap symbol, because we really appreciate it so much, your time and your advice and sharing. So we've got somebody who says, this was a productive panel and I feel much more confident about my work now. Oh, that's terrific. Yeah, you go people. You got this.